Imagine a motor so reliable, so rugged, that General Motors trusted it to haul taxis through endless city streets. Now imagine that very same motor, stripped, tuned, and unleashed on the drag strip, outperforming engines no one thought it could challenge. The Chevy 250 and 292 inline-six engines weren't just workhorses. They were underdogs hiding in plain sight. From taxis and delivery vans to street machines and even record-breaking drag cars, these engines carried a double life, quietly dependable by day, roaring heroes by night. And the most shocking part? GM may have intentionally held them back to protect their precious V8s. The birth of a giant, Chevy 292, inline-six, born in 1963, the Chevrolet 292. Inline-six stood tall, literally and figuratively, as the heavyweight of Chevy's straight-six lineup. At 4.8 liters, it was the giant of the family. Its design was overbuilt. Solid cast-iron block and head, forged steel crankshaft, and 7 massive main bearings that made the bottom end nearly indestructible. A 3.875-inch bore, paired with an enormous 4.125-inch stroke, provided it with torque that rivaled that of small block V8s and made it a natural workhorse. On paper, GM rated the 292 at roughly 165 horsepower and 260 to 280 pound-feet of torque. But tuners and mechanics who opened these engines up knew the truth. GM had deliberately kept it mild. With conservative cams and airflow-limiting intakes, it was underrated. In stock form, many found it could deliver 15 to 20% more power than advertised. Why would Chevy undersell it? Because the last thing Detroit executives wanted was a six-cylinder outperforming their flagship V8s. That would have rewritten the entire performance hierarchy. A workhorse by day. The 292 wasn't built to be a race motor. It was born for hard labor. It powered trucks, vans, and industrial rigs where its long stroke translated into endless low-end torque. Hauling heavy loads, towing trailers, and shrugging off punishing environments were its specialties. Fleet operators swore by it, praising its toughness and ability to rack up 300,000 miles or more without major rebuilds. Identifying a 292 under the hood became a point of pride for owners. It had tall lifter covers nearly 6 inches high, distinctive block casting numbers, and a fuel pump mounted squarely in the middle of the passenger side. If your Chevy carried those marks, you knew you had the king of inline-sixes, a badge of honor among working-class machines. A sleeper on the strip, but the story didn't end with trucks. Street racers and hot rodders soon discovered the 292's secret potential. Its forged crank, heavy rods, and rugged construction made it an unlikely racing platform. With a few smart upgrades, this humble workhorse became a monster. Turbocharging unlocked its true character. Boosted 292s have been known to produce over 1,000 horsepower, with some drag builds climbing to an incredible 1,300 horsepower. Builders balanced internals, ported cylinder heads, swapped in multi-carburetor intakes, and ran aggressive cams to wring out performance. Even mild street builds, with free-flowing exhausts, headers, and aftermarket intakes, put down muscle car-level numbers while delivering the smooth, unique sound of a straight six. That smoothness was another advantage. Inline sixes are naturally balanced, unlike V6s, which struggle with vibration. On the drag strip, this balance, combined with torque-heavy launches, gave the 292 an edge. And since it was cheaper and easier to find than many V8s, budget racers embraced it. Why buy a small block 350 when a turbocharged 292 could run the same times, or faster, for less? Enter the 250, the taxi motor with a dark secret. By 1966, Chevrolet introduced the 250 inline-six, the younger sibling to the 292. At 4.1 liters, it was smaller but equally impressive in design. It used a 3.875-inch bore with a 3.53-inch stroke, producing anywhere from 105 to 155 horsepower depending on carburetor setup, with around 235 pound-feet of torque delivered at just 1,600 RPM. This low-end grunt made it perfect for taxis, daily drivers, and light-duty trucks. Like the 292, it shared the same DNA: cast-iron construction, overhead valve design, and 7-main-bearing crankshaft for durability. Its 8.5-to-1 compression ratio kept it smooth, economical, and reliable. Affordable, easy to repair, and long-lasting, the 250 earned the nickname Taxi Motor. But behind that unglamorous reputation lay a dark secret. It was just as underrated as the 292. Tuners quickly discovered it could be transformed into something extraordinary. Brazil's turbocharged legend. If the 292 was America's workhorse, the 250 became South America's racing legend. In Brazil, racers adopted the 250 as their platform of choice for drag racing, pushing it to levels GM never intended. Turbocharged 250S began dominating local strips, with some builds producing over 1,000 horsepower and shredding quarter-mile records. Builders upgraded cylinder heads with larger valves, 1.94-inch intake, and 1.6-inch exhaust, while porting runners for maximum airflow. Forged pistons and 6-inch connecting rods allowed the engines to withstand massive boost pressures. Even naturally aspirated, modified 250s made over 230 horsepower with lump port head modifications. With forced induction, the sky was the limit. The sound of a screaming turbocharged 250 became iconic in Brazil. Cars once dismissed as taxis were suddenly blowing past high-dollar VI8 builds on the drag strip. Even today, the 250 holds legendary status there, remembered as one of the most formidable inline-six platforms ever unleashed. Creativity on a budget. Part of what made the 250 and 292 special was their adaptability. These engines rewarded creativity, particularly for budget-minded racers. Junkyard ingenuity became the norm. Marine and heavy-duty truck components were scavenged to strengthen builds, while performance cams, roller rockers, and stiff valve springs allowed them to rev higher and harder. Hot rodders loved them for their old-school character, racers loved them for their dependability, and grassroots builders loved them because they could be competitive without spending V8 money. The so-called taxi motor became a drag strip killer, embodying the spirit of do-it-yourself racing. GM's restriction and the integral head controversy. But GM wasn't content to let the sixes shine too brightly. In 1968, a controversial change hit the 250, the integral head design. Instead of separate intake and exhaust manifolds, the ports were cast directly into the head. While this improved fuel efficiency and lowered emissions, it strangled airflow and killed performance potential. For racers, it was a disaster. The new heads were nearly impossible to modify effectively. Enthusiasts quickly sought out earlier non-integrated heads to swap back in. Others simply doubled down on forced induction, using boost to overcome the airflow limitations. Once again, despite GM's efforts to restrain it, the 250 proved resilient. In the right hands, it remained a sleeper hero. 250 versus 292. Which was better? This debate still rages among enthusiasts. The 292, with its brute strength and torque-heavy personality, was the natural choice for trucks and heavy-duty builds. The 250, lighter and more rev-happy, was beloved by racers for its flexibility. Both engines had their merits, and both carried the same overbuilt DNA. The truth, they were both far stronger and more capable than GM ever admitted. Did GM hold them back? The question that lingers is whether GM intentionally suppressed the potential of the 250 and 292. The conservative ratings, mild camshafts, and restrictive intakes suggest it wasn't accidental. Was this corporate strategy? Planned obsolescence to protect the sales of their VI8s? Or was it simply fear that an inexpensive six-cylinder might dethrone their most profitable lineup? Consider it, a budget-friendly engine, capable of outlasting and, in the right hands, outperforming Chevy's own V8s. That was a dangerous proposition for a company built on the image of the small block. The sixes may have been too good for their own good. The legacy lives on. Decades later, the legacy of the Chevy 250 and 292 inline-six engines continues to thrive. Truck restorers prize the 292 for its unmatched torque and durability. Nostalgia racers and hot rodders keep the 250 alive as a budget-friendly performance hero. In Brazil, the 250 remains immortalized as a turbocharged drag legend. Aftermarket support has kept them relevant, with parts readily available for rebuilds and performance upgrades. Builders today continue to push their limits, reaching horsepower numbers GM never could have imagined. These engines were more than just taxi motors. They were, and still are, V8 killers in disguise. Two engines, built for work duty, engineered for reliability, but hiding the bones of champions. The Chevy 250 and 292 inline-six stand as proof that greatness doesn't always announce itself with chrome badges and big marketing campaigns. Sometimes it's tucked away under the hood of a taxi or a farm truck, waiting for someone brave enough to unleash it. GM may have underestimated, restricted, or even phased them out, but their story is one of resilience. Even today, they roar on, sometimes as boosted monsters putting down 4-digit horsepower, sometimes as faithful companions pulling classic C10s down quiet back roads. So here's the question. Did GM deliberately hide the true power of the 250 and 292? Were they simply too good for their own good? And if Chevrolet built them today, with modern tech like direct injection, variable valve timing, and lightweight alloys, could they rival the best of today's engines? The debate lives on. These engines may have been born as taxi motors, but on the drag strip and in the hands of dreamers, they became race heroes. And that legacy can never be silenced.